In October 2024, the BRICS held their first summit with new members, including Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia, and the United Arab Emirates, and also formalized invitations for 13 more countries to potentially join the organization in the future. However, this expansion of BRICS has been viewed negatively by the United States and Donald Trump, as the strengthening of the bloc would threaten the country's economic dominance, which currently adopts a more protectionist stance characterized by threats of high tariffs and aggressive trade policies. This approach collides with BRICS' goals, particularly since the bloc aims to reduce dependence on the dollar as a weapon. Therefore, Trump's constant threats against BRICS are unsurprising, including his announcement to impose 100% tariffs if the bloc advances with the creation of its own currency or proceeds with measures that weaken the dollar. Despite this, the bloc continues to discuss alternatives to the dollar in commercial transactions, which could reduce American influence in global trade in the future. In this video, we'll understand how BRICS intends to defeat Trump and what actions the bloc may take to reduce the United States' economic power in the future. In this sense, to analyze how BRICS is tipping the balance of American influence and power, it is essential to understand how the bloc has gained such international recognition, changing many countries' perspectives on the United States and its economic and political hegemony over other nations. Initially, the rise of the group of countries composed of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa first emerged in 2006, though without South Africa, which joined as a member only in 2011. Since then, BRICS has grown strategically, evolving from a forum for cooperation among major emerging economies into an interesting alternative to the already established economic and political order maintained by the West. This success achieved by BRICS over the past few years is due to the organization's pragmatism in overcoming its political and ideological differences to prioritize its competitive market advantages. A good example of this is that since its founding, the bloc has brought together countries with distinct political and economic models, ranging from a liberal democracy like Brazil, a commercial powerhouse like China, a country with a history of diplomatic confrontations with the West like Russia, a populous and dynamic nation like India, and an emerging economy with a strong history of social inequality like South Africa. Despite this, these same countries managed to grow in a coordinated manner as a relevant actor on the global stage, not only because they are the nations that trade the most commodities in the global market, accounting for about 16% of international trade in 2019, but primarily due to the bloc's institutionalization capacity, which sought to position itself as a partner entity for emerging markets. A good example is the BRICS Development Bank, established in 2014 with its headquarters in China. This bank was created in response to the IMF's bureaucracy and its failure to implement structural reforms that the bloc had been supporting, especially after the 2008 crisis, when one of the measures was blocked in the US Congress. Thus, the BRICS Bank was established to provide more operational freedom to member countries and access to financing for infrastructure projects without having to rely on the IMF or the World Bank, which have historically shown a bias toward the interests of the United States and Europe. In exchange for loans and financing, these institutions often impose austerity measures on debtor countries. This occurs because the US and its allies, including Japan, Germany, the United Kingdom, and France, hold up to 40% of the voting power in the organization, ensuring that IMF actions meet the requirements of these nations when necessary. This scenario was recently observed when Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. At the time, international institutions provided financial guarantees to the Ukrainians, including multi-billion-dollar aid packages and an IMF support program worth $115 billion to stabilize the Ukrainian economy and facilitate its accession to the European Union. To secure these resources, the European bloc and the G7 became the main donors, while sanctioning Russia and limiting its access to international trade. In response, the BRICS alternative emerged, which until recently accounted for 41% of the global population and 24% of the world's GDP, with the organization's bank quickly gaining global prominence due to its already consolidated credit base, which can reach $100 billion. It also serves as a less burdensome financing source, better aligned with the interests of countries that do not feel adequately represented in the IMF and wish to be part of a less demanding and interventionist framework. For the BRICS, the NDB was essential in attracting new partners such as Egypt, Bangladesh, and the United Arab Emirates, which joined the bank in 2021. In 2023, the invitation for new countries to join the organization was formalized at the Johannesburg Summit in South Africa, where 6 new members were announced, including Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and Argentina, which withdrew after Javier Milei's election. Thus, the question arises, how do the BRICS intend to defeat Trump? Eventually, with the expansion of new members, the BRICS capacity increased considerably, not only due to the addition of resources, but also because of the geopolitical weight acquired in 2024. As a result, the BRICS surpassed the G7, reaching 33% of the world's GDP. The inclusion of major oil producers such as the United Arab Emirates and Iran demonstrates the bloc's desire to influence the global oil market, which has traditionally been traded in US dollars. For the US, oil trade in dollars is crucial as it maintains constant demand for the American currency, resulting in large reserves of petrodollars. This demand helps keep the dollar's value high and stable in the market, contributing to the monetary stability of the United States and allowing the country to finance exorbitant budget deficits without facing significant inflation issues. This is because other countries buy US Treasury bonds to maintain dollar reserves, with over 50% of global currency reserves currently composed of the American currency. As a result, due to global trade in oil and other commodities circulating in the market such as coal, gas, and agricultural products like soybeans being priced in dollars, the American financial system becomes the means to purchase these products. A good example is SWIFT, created by the United States and its partners in the late 1970s to facilitate international banking transactions between countries and their companies. Currently, SWIFT covers all continents and serves over 11,000 institutions worldwide, unanimously becoming the largest system of its kind. By partially controlling SWIFT, the United States can impose economic sanctions and block the access of countries and entities to this system, preventing those sanctioned from accessing international trade or using their assets held in banks in other nations. With the current stance of the BRICS, this US monopoly over the international flow of transactions, investments, and currency circulation has never been more weakened, especially because the bloc has been organizing a boycott against the dollar in recent years through trade in local currencies. In practice, instead of using the dollar, BRICS countries are supporting the idea of using their own national currencies for trade among themselves, something that has already been happening between China and Russia since the Russians were sanctioned by the United States after invading Ukraine. Both countries have signed long-term trade agreements, and over 90% of bilateral trade between the two countries, now exceeding $200 billion, is conducted in yuan and rubles through their own systems similar to SWIFT, but without the interference of the United States and its allies, such as Russia's SPFS and China's CIPs. Therefore, the BRICS challenge the global monopoly that Washington has exercised for decades over developing countries and commodity exporters. Given the advancement of de-dollarization, which weakens the dollar, and SWIFT, pillars of the United States' financial stability, a US reaction was inevitable. This became evident in Trump's statements, where he threatened tariffs of up to 100% against BRICS countries. His protectionist and unilateral stance reflects the recurring US strategy of imposing economic barriers when its interests are contested by geopolitical rivals, attempting to preserve its global influence in the face of the rise of new powers. As a consequence, Trump's stance reveals a view that the rise of the BRICS poses a direct threat to the economic power of the United States, theoretically justifying his efforts to isolate the bloc and curb its growth potential. This is especially significant with the bloc's expansion in 2024 and the possibility of expanding commercial cooperation through the creation of a joint currency, which would strengthen not only trade ties but also political and diplomatic ones, enhancing the BRICS' role as a representative of emerging countries. Particularly with Trump's more aggressive and isolated stance driving away traditional allies, as seen in the announcement of tariffs on Canada and Mexico, the controversial idea of buying Greenland from Denmark, and the recent clash between Trump and Colombian President Gustavo Petro, straining the historically strong diplomatic ties between the US and Colombia. So it is not impossible to imagine a scenario in which European Union countries and natural allies of the United States, such as Japan and South Korea, seek rapprochement with the BRICS to reduce their dependence on the American market. especially with Trump's criticism of Europeans for not following Washington's criteria and threats of import tariffs on European products. In practice, these statements by Trump corroborate the antagonism of the United States on the international stage, creating conditions for a global leadership vacuum, which the BRICS can occupy with more inclusive economic and diplomatic policies. Not to mention that Trump's recent threats of tariffs on the bloc's member countries could have the opposite effect to that intended, especially from large US trading partners such as China and India, which could retaliate in the same measure, something that would make trade of American products in these very relevant markets difficult, with the Chinese demanding 17% of exports from the US agricultural sector, for example. Consequently, by rivaling the BRICS, Trump rekindles a new front of economic and political dispute for the United States, because if the trade war against the BRICS becomes a reality, it is natural that the fragmentation of the economic order led by the Americans will occur faster than expected. Given that as the dollar loses space and new centers of influence such as the BRICS emerge, the United States may isolate itself geopolitically and lose strength, limiting its ability to impose rules on global trade. This opens up a great possibility for the BRICS to lead a more pragmatic world order that is less prone to conflict of interests. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you can, drop a comment below with the next topic you'd like to see on the channel. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and share it with your friends. Thanks again for your support, and see you in the next video.